Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced his support for investigations into Russian influence on the U.S. election. He also answered questions on replacing the Affordable Care Act and tax reform at this 25-minute news conference.
Are you live?
Now you are.
Well, I think this has been one heck of a year. I hate to see it end, and it was topped off Saturday night. You see I have my Louisville sweater on. Louisville quarterback Lamar Jackson won the Heisman Trophy Saturday night, topping off a terrific year for the things that I care about, like holding the Senate and electing a president. I know the main subject you're interested in this morning, and I'm going to read a statement, which I typically don't do with these, but I want to make sure you fully understand what I have to say on the issue that I think is mostly on your minds this morning. Obviously, any foreign breach of our cybersecurity measures is disturbing, and I strongly condemn any such efforts. Prior to the election, the Director of National Intelligence released a statement saying that the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations. That is what the intelligence community believes can be said in unclassified remarks without risking sources and methods. Anything else is irresponsible, likely illegal, and potentially for partisan political gain. I agree with Senator Schumer, Chairman McCain, Burr, and others. This simply cannot be a partisan issue. Let me remind all of you that the Senate Intelligence Committee, on which I and the Chairman of the Armed Services Committee sit as ex officio members, is more than capable of conducting a complete review of this matter. And Senator Schumer will soon join us on the committee, and he can review this matter through the regular order. I have every confidence in Chairman Burr that he will review the matter in a responsible way. The Obama administration is also now launching a review, and when the Office of the Director of National Intelligence completes its review, there will be additional information released to the public in a responsible manner. Chairman McCain has announced that he will conduct a review within the Armed Services Committee of the threat that we face from cyber attacks. That will be useful, as we need to integrate our cyber capabilities into our overall warfighting doctrine. The Obama administration for 8 years attempted to reset relations with Russia and sat back while Russia expanded its sphere of influence, intervened in Crimea, eastern Ukraine, Syria, and attempted to bully the Baltic countries. It defies belief that somehow Republicans in the Senate are reluctant to either review Russian tactics or ignore them. So last, let me say that I have the highest confidence in the intelligence community and especially the central intelligence agencies. The CIA is filled with selfless patriots, many of whom anonymously risk their lives for the American people. Excuse me, can I have some water? Is there some here? Yeah. Let me just say in wrapping up the Congress, and then I'll open it for your questions. I think by any objective standard, the 114th Congress looks pretty good compared to the previous one. Everything from the Cures bill to NDAA bills, the first long-term highway bill in 20 years, FAA, WRDA, the Water Resources Bill, permanent tax relief. We addressed the opioid and prescription drug epidemic in a major way, a complete rewrite of No Child Left Behind, the K through 12 education issue, VA accountability, a cybersecurity bill, a permanent doc fix, human trafficking, trade promotion authority, and many others. So even though there were obviously some pretty big differences in a time of divided government, I think we were able to search for the things, it was my desire to search for the things that we had some agreement on and make some progress for the country. And there were a number of things upon which we were able to score some points for the American people. So with that, let me throw it open. Manu?
Senator, from what you understand, do you believe that the Russian government was intentionally trying to sway this election to Donald Trump?
Manu, as I indicated, the reason I read that statement is I think that pretty thoroughly covers what I'm prepared to say about that issue.
And you talked about an investigation. Do you support a separate bipartisan investigation, a commission in any way, or do you want to do this through the Intelligence Committee? Would you oppose?
We're going to follow the regular order. It's an important subject, and we intend to review it on a bipartisan basis.
You embedded in your statement there a critique of the Obama administration reset with Russia or attempt to warm with Russia. Does it likewise concern you the signals that are coming from the new administration, at least from the top of it, of a different attitude, orientation, and more friendliness toward Russia, both through appointments and statements?
Well, let me just speak for myself. The Russians are not our friends. They invaded Crimea. Senator McCain and I and some of our Democratic friends met with a delegation from the Baltic countries just this past week. To say that they're nervous about the Russians, to put it mildly. Let me also say, as I said last year, NATO's important. We intend to keep the commitments that are made in the NATO agreement, which I think by any objective standard has probably been one of the most, if not the most successful military alliance in world history. And I think we ought to approach all of these issues on the assumption that the Russians do not wish us well.
Leader McConnell, is it a problem, though, that the incoming president is sending these sorts of signals to Russia that he is sending? And what do you say about his supposed appointment of Rex Tillerson to be the secretary?
Well, I'm going to save us a lot of time by saying I just addressed how I feel about the Russians, and I hope that those who are going to be in positions of responsibility in the new administration share my view.
You mentioned your confidence in U.S. intelligence agencies, but are you concerned that the president-elect continues to deny their October conclusion that Russia was behind the hacking and that he's now questioning the credibility of the CIA?
Look, I've already addressed my own view about where we are on those issues, and I really don't have any intention of further elaborating. Yeah.
Should President-elect Trump nominate Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State this week, would you have any concerns about a nominee who could financially benefit from lifting of sanctions on Russia?
Well, I've been very impressed with the nomination so far, and we'll have to wait and see who is nominated for Secretary of State, and we'll obviously treat whoever that is with respect. They'll go through the regular process and respond to questions, and we'll see where it comes out.
Do you think Rex Tillerson could be confirmed in the Senate if he was nominated?
Yeah, let's wait until we get nominees. I think of the nominees that we're already aware of, I think I'm optimistic that they'll all be confirmed. But I don't want to comment on a kind of a phantom nominee today. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Can you just go back one more time and clarify for us? It was reported over the weekend that you had expressed skepticism in some of the closed-door briefings about the intelligence. Can you just clarify for us if that is accurate?
Well, I clarified for you what I had to say about that in the statement that I read at our opening. Yeah.
Senator, do you think, though, that this president-elect is getting off on such a great footing with the intelligence agencies overall? That's the general, trajectory that is getting on right now?
Well, I'll comment on who's been nominated so far. I think Mike Pompeo is an outstanding choice for CIA. I think General Mattis is an outstanding choice for defense. I'm optimistic the president's going to have a good national security team, all aspects of it, in place.
But with regard to his relationship with the intelligence agencies?
I think I've pretty well covered that, yeah.
Senator McConnell, Some Senate Republicans talked about a 3-year transition to replace Obamacare. You know, in the House side, conservatives are saying that's too long. Do you agree that it's too long to wait 3 years to replace Obamacare?
Well, let me just make sure everybody understands the status quo is not sustainable. The notion that we could do nothing and allow the current law to implode is unacceptable. So I hope no one believes no action is possible or appropriate. Therefore, we will move right after the first of the year on an Obamacare replacement resolution. And then we will work expeditiously to come up with a better proposal than current law, because current law is simply unacceptable and not sustainable. And we'll be working with the various stakeholders to get their best advice about what comes next. And with regard to the phase-in period, the timing of all that, that is yet to be determined. But let me just say again, doing nothing is not an option, because you've seen the headlines all across America all last year about the status quo.
Do you have a personal preference as to what sort of phase-in you'd like to see?
When we get through deciding how we're going to do that, I'll be happy to let you know.
The various stakeholders that you said you will be working with are also warning about the dangers that would come if a repeal or if a replacement were not established before repeal would happen. This is actuaries, hospitals, medical associations. How does that factor into your decision to do?
Well, none of those people that you mentioned are happy with the status quo. They want changes too. And we're going to work with them to come up with a better system than this monstrosity that was left behind by the Obama administration.
Will there be any framework established before you guys do a repeal in terms of what a replacement would look
Well,
like?
we'll let you know after the first year. We're going to move forward first with the Obamacare replacement resolution. What comes next is what comes next. In other words, legislatively, then we will determine what the replacement is going to be.
While you're trying to put together that replacement, is one of your principles going to be that you'll cover as many Americans with health insurance as currently have it now?
Well, 85% of Americans have coverage, and there's still roughly 25 million who don't. So if coverage was the issue, Obamacare was an abysmal failure. Surely we can do better for the American people, and that's what we intend to try to do.
Does that mean your end goal
That means
will be
that,
to
as I
cover
said
more
earlier,
people?
we'll move first with the Obamacare replacement resolution, and then we will come with what the replacement actually will be. Yeah.
Senator Blunt has suggested that the replacement will be phased in piecemeal over time, that his provision that he liked and that a lot of people like on the letting your 26-year-old child or under stay on your plan, that will be separate, that could be passed separate. Is that the approach that you would like and I think is reasonable?
Yeah, I don't know how many times I have to say the same thing, but we're going to be working on the phase-in period and what it looks like once we get to step 2. Step 1 is the Obamacare replacement resolution, which we'll turn to right after the first of the year. Paul?
Can you go back on Russia? What exactly will the Intelligence Committee be doing? And is this just going to be in the Intelligence Committee? Do you expect, have you talked to Speaker Ryan? Will the House have some sort of role here?
Yeah, I haven't talked to the Speaker.
Talking about multiple committees.
Yeah, Senator McCain and I think Senator Burr will both be looking at this issue and doing it on a bipartisan basis, as I indicated in my statement. So.
Can you walk us through your timeline for the fiscal 2017 budget resolution? We've heard from Chairman Price on the House side that he expects that to be a bare bones budget. Is that your thought, that we'll see the same type of document from the Senate side? And will we see any reconciliation instructions in that outside of the ACA repeal language?
We anticipate doing 2 budget resolutions this year. The first will be the Obamacare repeal resolution, and then we will do one later in the spring, which will largely be dedicated to tax reform. So there'll be 2 this year. And they will set up reconciliation follow-on vehicles for us to address 2 very important issues the President-elect talked about and we all care about. repealing and replacing Obamacare and doing comprehensive tax reform. And we're all worried about and concerned about the offshoring of U.S. jobs. The single biggest reason for that is our tax structure, which makes it very difficult in many instances to stay here, because the corporate tax rate and now the individual tax rate that most businesses use as well is way too high, and it's an uncompetitive situation. The President-elect's made it clear he's going to move on as many regulatory changes as he can make as soon as he takes office. Much of that was done by executive order or regulations of one kind or another. The two biggest impediments to growth in our country are overregulation and the tax structure. And the President-elect seems to be committed to addressing both of those, and the Republican majorities in the House and Senate are as well. Yeah.
Senator, you said one of your top goals for this past year was getting regular order restored to the appropriations process and passing spending bills on time for the first time in 2 decades. You obviously failed in that.
I didn't. The Democrats, just to refresh your memory, decided to ball up. They decided to ball up the appropriations process, which you can do if you have enough of a minority to do it, because they wanted us to end up in a year-end situation like we did. Now, we'll see whether they have a different view next year. I hope so.
Well, my question
I gave up to 6 weeks to try to process individual appropriation bills. The Democrats simply wouldn't let them out of the Senate.
Well, Congress.
So let's put the failure where it belongs.
Well, okay. But your caucus will even be smaller next year than it was this year, and the same is true on the House side. So I guess I'm wondering, well, why should we expect anything to be any better next year, or should we?
Well, I hope so. I mean, there'll be enough Senate Democrats to ball the process up again if they choose to. To what end, though? I think what they concluded this past year was that when they have a president that they like, balling up the process gives the president a lot of clout at the end of the year and actually benefited them. It'll be interesting to see if they think balling up the process when you have a different president of a different party in the White House makes sense. Maybe they'll have more incentive to cooperate on trying to get back to a regular appropriations process, which the Speaker and I would both very much like to do.
So it's all on them.
It certainly was this year, and the minority in the Senate's not irrelevant unless it's a little bitty minority.
Yeah. Senator, last week Democrats tried to get the president-elect to weigh in on the coal miners issue and Buy America. Did you speak with him or his team encourage him to stay out of it? And what do you make of the fact that he didn't kind of take the bait?
Yeah, I haven't discussed it with him. My own view on that is the coal miner health care issue. I had hoped we would get a full year. We ended up getting enough a fix through the duration of the CR, the end of April. And it's my goal to try to get that coal miner health care issue fixed.
Senator
Yeah.
In the past, Republicans have talked a lot about the massive debt we have. It's going to be $20 trillion the next time the debt limit expires. Are Republicans going to take any affirmative actions that will actually reduce the debt? And are you going to be committed to PAYGO and tax reform, paying for itself, et cetera, and doing things like that you talked about before the election that you hope to do next year, things like Medicare and Social Security, which are all obviously very difficult to do politically?
Again, I can only speak for myself, but I think this level of national debt is dangerous and unacceptable. And so whatever we choose to do next year, I hope we will not lose sight of steps that we could take that would exacerbate the problem. And so I am concerned about it, and all of those things I think we ought to take into consideration on each of the things that we do going forward.
Because the president-elect has talked about a massive infrastructure plan over $1 trillion. He talked about a lot of other huge tax cuts, which nonpartisan outside experts say could add trillions of dollars to the debt. Would you commit to saying, hey, I will not move things that will add to the deficit?
Well, my preference on tax reform is that it be revenue neutral to the government, that it not exacerbate the issue that you raised, and on the infrastructure issue, it'll be interesting to see how this is put together. We want to see, I am interested in seeing what is the administration going to recommend, and I think the details are really important. What I hope we will clearly avoid, and I'm confident we will, is $1 trillion stimulus. I take you back to 2009, we borrowed $1 trillion and nobody could find that it did much of anything. It seemed to me basically what it did was plus up a bunch of federal accounts. And when you looked around trying to find examples of things that actually occurred, they were darn few. So we need to do this carefully and correctly, and the issue of how to pay for it needs to be dealt with responsibly.
So this won't be like...
Yeah.
Sort of a legacy question. I'm curious how you would describe your last 8 years dealing directly with President Obama, and moving forward, how you describe your relationship working so far with President-elect Trump. How often do you guys speak? I understand he speaks pretty frequently, almost daily, with the speaker.
Yeah, well, I think President Obama's a guy. He wanted to move the country significantly to the left, and he did. He did it the first 2 years because he had total control of Congress. The $1 trillion stimulus, Obamacare, Dodd-Frank. And then I was wrong in my predictions 3 times. I thought after the 2010 election, President Obama would pivot to the center. He didn't do that. I thought after the 2012 election, when he didn't get the House back, he'd pivot to the center. He didn't do that. I thought surely after the 2014 election, he would pivot to the center, and he didn't do that. So it's pretty clear now, if you look back over the last 8 years, the president wanted to move America significantly to the left, what I would call the Europeanization of America. High taxes, over-regulation, and what you get in the end is slow growth. And we've been underperforming from a growth point of view all through these years. The poorest recovery after a deep recession since World War II. So if you bear in mind that that's what he wanted to do, I think he moved the country significantly in a European direction. The good news for us is that a lot of that was done by executive orders and regulations. And to get the country going again, in my view, as I said earlier, we have to deal with a regulatory onslaught and tax reform to take our foot off the brake and get it on the accelerator. And so I think the president was very effective at doing what he wanted to do. Bear in mind, Reagan never had the House for 8 years. He moved to the middle, did raise the age for Social Security, did the last comprehensive tax reform 30 years ago. Clinton, when he lost the House and Senate, did welfare reform, and we balanced the budget 3 years in a row. I think we can safely say about President Obama, he was not a centrist. And with regard to the new president, we have a terrific relationship, and he's a very high energy person. Just to give you an example, in talking to my colleagues on the floor last week, it was astonishing how many of them have been talking to him. He's very, very accessible, very energetic. I wonder if the man ever sleeps. And I think we're all excited about the energy and the direction that he seems to want to take the country. And the best evidence of that, I think, are the appointments that have been made so far, all of which I think have been pretty impressive.
Yeah. Senator McConnell, during the Obama years, you said the debt ceiling should be used as an instrument to actually cut the deficit. Do you want to apply that principle during the Trump years, and do you view that as an instrument that should?
Well, on one occasion, it was helpful. The Budget Control Act in August of 2011 actually did end up reducing government spending for 2 years in a row for the first time since right after the Korean War. And the much reviled sequester has put a lot of pressure on domestic discretionary spending. There have been other times when we have raised the debt ceiling and not done it in connection with some effort to reduce spending. But at least on that one occasion, I think it brought us all to the table. This was the first of 3 deals that I did with the Vice President who is very transactional and a terrific negotiator. And I think if the president had wanted to do more deals with us, he would have designated Biden. But that was all in the first term. There were 3 major deals negotiated in the first term. I did all 3 of them with Biden. The August 2011 Budget Control Act, going back the year before, the 2-year extension of the Bush tax cuts at the end of 2010, and then the fiscal cliff deal, New Year's Eve of 2012. Obviously, the vice president was not freelancing. The president gave him the opportunity to negotiate. In the second term, McCain, who has a wicked sense of humor, as all of you know, said Joe was in a witness protection program. So their best negotiator was not around during the second term. And I think there was nothing the president wanted to negotiate. I'm sorry for rambling on here, but I think it's unclear to me whether the raising of the debt ceiling will end up carrying other things with it or not.
Leader McConnell.
One more? You're up.
Will Senate Republicans respond legislatively if President Trump revokes the 2012 executive order that President Obama did, affecting about 750,000 Dreamers, the young immigrants who came here illegally?
About what?
The deferred action for childhood arrivals, DACA, the 2012 executive.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what the new administration recommends in that whole area. Well, have a great Christmas, everyone. We'll see you next year, and we'll go back at it. Thank you.
Much court meeting, Christmas.